So welcome to the webinar today. Today we'll be focusing on data analysis workflows for maximum efficiency. My name is Robin Kamacheka and I'm a technical application specialist with the Novo software. So before we get started today, I'm going to go over some housekeeping rules. I'm going to kind of give you some information about this GoToWebinar in case you're new to this space. There are two ways that you can hear me. One is through using the computer audio. The other is using the call-in information that was provided in your registration email. If you can hear me, please feel free to write into that questions box. Just say hi, hello. I'm really happy that you guys are here and joining me today on this webinar. And then additionally, in this question section, this is where we can ask our questions. I encourage you to use this as much as you want to. I want you to get the most out of this session. And so the more interactive you are, the more I can meet you where you're at and get those questions answered for you. I do have my colleagues online with me today. I have Holly Bonar, who's going to be helping me with answering questions as they come in. I also have Greg Veltri, who is helping me organize this webinar, and he'll also be answering questions in the questions box if needed. I will be answering questions live too, so if you do have something that you would like answered in real time, go ahead and get it into that question box, and I will try to get to that question. So let's talk about what do I actually mean when I say data analysis workflows for maximum efficiency? What is that? Well, there are actually three places where we can be efficient or inefficient when we're doing analysis. One is data. What does it look like? How is my data being handled in a workspace? The second is developing that analysis strategy within FCS Express. What tools are there to help me quickly recreate my analysis or create my analysis? What can I use to really maximize the effort that I'm putting in to get a great output? And third is the results. What are the results that I want? How can I create them quickly without having to jump through multiple different software packages? How do I get from point A, introducing my data, to the results as efficiently as possible? Well, fortunately, FCS Express brings a lot to the table to help you efficiently analyze your data. So let's break down these three objects a little bit further. So how can I optimize my workflow? Really, I've broken it down into like 4 segments. They're little fluid, so there's going to be movement back and forth between all of these. But these are the places where we really meet you exactly where you are. So one is setting up a workspace. This is even before analysis. What do I know about my analysis needs? How do I want my plots to look? We have a ton of FCS Express user options that can be set in advance. So when you get into the workspace, you're not having to rebuild, recreate, reformat. You can have these things set and established. This will really help optimize your workflow because every time you come into FCS Express, it will recall those user settings and you're able to just move on with your analysis without having to go backwards and recreate anything. Additionally, formatting. So while we can create some user options that maybe are dealing with our formatting and things beforehand, when we're doing our analysis, there's always the times where we need to do those on-the-spot adjustments. Maybe we're optimizing some formatting, optimizing arrangements, alignments, how plots are being displayed, parameter scaling. There's so many different tools in the software to help you make sure that while you're building this analysis strategy, you have that flexibility. That's really one of the most important things that FCS Express brings, is that we meet you exactly where you are. We have a lot of tools and a lot of flexibility so that you can make your analysis as complex or as simple. You can meet you exactly where you are with your analysis needs. So now shortcuts and other tools, let's talk about those and useful features. We have ways to create multiple plots at the same time. We can introduce panels, controls, internal spreadsheets, batch processing, and the list goes on. I'll be covering as many as I can, but of course there'll be something that I miss. So if you have any questions or you want to see something else, please feel free to just click in that question box and let me know, hey Robin, what about this? Saving layouts. Now you've introduced and invested all of this energy creating this workspace. I've created this analysis strategy, got my user settings, got everything aligned, but now what? So we wanted to make sure that because you invested that effort up front, we want that effort to have value, and not just value as like a one-to-one. We want to multiply its value. We do this by templates. Once you've created this analysis strategy, you save it as a template, and then the next time I run my experiment, I open the template, add my data files, press run to create my reportables, whether they're spreadsheets, PDFs, Excel files, and so forth. And then I'm done. Like, I've done my analysis. I've created exactly what I need. This reusable template optimizes, enhances, and increases my efficiency while I'm doing my analysis. And I know you're probably like, okay, sounds really good, Robin, but where am I going to get started? And my answer is we're going to get started in those FCS Express user options. So those are found under File and Options. Now in this window, if you've ever been here, I know you're probably like twitched a little bit, and don't worry, I totally get it. We have a lot of different options, but that is totally for the benefit of our users. In our flow cytometry community, we have a lot of diversity, and everyone needs something just a little bit different for their analysis. So FCS Express really delivers on these user options. Now, as a technical application specialist, I get a ton of questions, and one that always comes up is about parameters. I'll get the, hi Robin, I built this layout and it was working fine, but I just ran my latest data set. I brought it into my workspace and suddenly my parameters changed. What happened? And it's like, okay, I know exactly what that is. So one of the settings that I'm going to talk about first is how we remember our parameters by. This is super important because this is actually non-modifiable. After I've selected this and created a template, it cannot be changed. It is locked into that parameter setting. So we have two options here. We have number and name. Now I'm going to back out just a little bit so that you can see how it's locked into the layout. When we go to Info, Layout Options, you'll see right here my parameters are remembered by number. This is non-modifiable. This is forever with this layout that it will remember the parameters by number. And this is super important because everything builds onto that. When I do my gates also remember parameters by number. So it's really the foundation of a layout. Now, it is modifiable in that user option setting as long as you change it before you create that new layout. So there are some benefits to both, right? And you just have to choose which one is going to be best for your analysis. Remembering both numbers and name is remembered and from the acquisition instrument. So that's assigned by the acquisition instrument. That's nothing that's determined by FCS Express. It's already defined by your instrument. And those can and do vary very much from instrument to instrument. So this setting is very important because once we have set it, one, it's unmodifiable, but we need to know a little bit about when to use it, right? So using the name option can be really great if you have an assay that might expand or you have some drop-in samples. This way, as long as that parameter name from the instrument doesn't change, you'll be able to just add more parameters, manipulate that a little bit, and it'll remember those parameters by name, so you'll be good to go. Number can be a great option if you would like consistency. If you know that each time that you run this experiment, we're only collecting 13 parameters, it's consistent, then you can just use the number option and you'll be just fine as well. So now the next thing that comes to mind is compensation. This is always a biggie, right? FCS Express has a lot of flexibility when it comes to compensation because we want you to have total control of how compensation is applied in the workspace. So we have a lot of different options. None, compensation on mixing default, that's anything that we create in FCS Express. FCS file, that's something coming from internally. You did it on the instrument and it's built into that FCS or your data file, and we can just bring that into the workspace. And then we have some priorities. We can use that FCS file compensation first and then do whatever we created in FCS Express, or vice versa. We can have what we create in FCS Express be the first priority and then use the FCS file if we don't create anything in the workspace. By default, this is what is set here, the compensation on mixing default, then our FCS file. Now, talking about data, we have some options about how we are bringing our data files into FCS Express. We know that across different instruments, there are various data ranges. There's all kind of things that are different, and sometimes acquisition software looks differently than our workspace. So we've worked really closely with a lot of different instruments to make sure that what you were seeing during acquisition is very closely resembling into what we're doing in our workspace here. So we have some instruments that we know there were some differences. So we're giving you some options here for instruments that we already have some known things. If you're using a different instrument, but you have some specific things you'd like to set up, you can always add another instrument. So just add general or copy one of the other ones to kind of give you basis of how to get started and do this identification rule. So this identification rule is pulling something right from the FCS file to identify that specific instrument so that these settings can be applied. But also we have the option to just do a default FCS file. This is important. We can tell it how do we want our parameter name to be displayed. Do we want the name from the instrument? Do we want the stain? That's something that I've input. Is that okay? Do I want to put the name and stain or stain and name? And those are just the opposites of what is coming first and what's coming later. Additionally, we can tell what kind of scaling we want for our parameters. For our scatter parameters, do we want linear? Do we want biax? What is this optimal scatter parameter for our analysis? Same thing with fluorescence here. We can choose those different scalings just to make sure that when we're bringing in our data, we're seeing exactly what we want to see without having to go backwards and recreate things every time we're bringing in a specific data set. So the last one I'm going to pick on today is this files and directories. And this is actually one of my favorites. I'm a left to right worker, so I actually often set a default template file. What this does is kind of give you a leg up. If you know every time you get into your workspace, you want a certain layout, you want a certain way to start, you can define this template file. And then when you open a new layout, you're going to see that. I also like these default directory for data files and layouts. Just when you're looking for something to open up a data file or open up a layout, it will bring you right to this directory so you're not having to navigate through multiple different folders. Again, just trying to make it efficient so that you can get your data into the workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and I created a template for display here. So I'm going to go ahead and add that now. And then I'm going to go to my general tab, and I'm actually going to change this remember by name because we're going to look at those layout options again. So I'm going to click OK here. Then I'm going to go to File and New to open up that new layout. And you're going to see what my template looks like. So this is my starting point. It has a little bit of arrangement here so I can start introducing those plots. And if I go to that File, Info, and Layout options, I'm going to see my parameters are remembered by name in this layout. All right, so moving back into where we started. So we've gotten a little familiar with our user options. There are so many user options available that can be set. It's really a good investment to set these up front because once you've established an FCS Express user option, it is saved in a user options file. This file can then be exported to share with all the users in a group. So you don't have to, each user doesn't have to make the same thing. You can just share that, load it in, import it, and then you don't have to worry. Everybody's going to have those same user settings. You can also individualize it if that's the better way to go, right? So again, just introducing that flexibility to make sure that you can do what you need to do. Now, if you're interested in sharing that user file, we go to System, Current User, and you can export or import these options from a file again to either share them with somebody else, standardize across the user group, give you some options there. So now we're back into our workspace and let's just start getting ready to analyze. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open my data list. Of course, your windows are dockable. I like to control how my space is being used in FCS Express. That helps me really optimize my workflow. If I can't find something or something gets lost, it gets a little more difficult to figure out what I'm doing next in my workspace. So of course you can take, I use the blue plus icon, but you can also drag and drop from a data file and data folder rather into the workspace, but I've already used that blue plus icon, so I'm just going to select these here and do open file. Now, once I have them loaded into my data list, now I'm just going to drag and drop. So drag and drop is also one of the tools that really just enhances the ability to get through your data workflow pretty quickly. I can drag and drop and do so many different things that it's really quite great when I'm trying to build up an analysis here. Now, in this first data plot that we've created here, we've got compensated. So I'm going to take a moment to run us back to compensation. Whenever we're loading compensation, we will automatically bring it in from the data file. That's what you see here. This is just coming from what was done at acquisition as part of the information that is pulled out from that FCS file. So I have that data file here. or my compensation matrix here rather. And then if I were to create anything manually, I would just use this drop down and add it here. Now, why am I bringing up compensation? Compensation is one of those points where some people prefer to do it in the same space. Some people prefer to have compensation in a separate layout. It really just depends. Fortunately, in FCS Express, again, going with that flexibility, you have the ability to import and export out your matrices. So it's really, if you decide to do your compensation separately, you can just export that matrix out, and I've already exported this one actually. So if I go back to that template data or the template layout that we were working with before, I can go back to their compensation window, do a right click and import a compensation. And you'll see here, you create this little compensation file here, just click on open, and then it's going to be here available for any analysis that I do downstream. I actually prefer to have them separate because it gives me a little more space. With our compensation, you will create a scatter page, a floor stain page for each individual floor and stain, and then you'll have a crossover stain matrix and a spillover spread matrix page as well. So it can be a lot of pages depending on how many controls you have for a given experiment. Now, I won't go into much more detail about compensation, but if you do have any additional questions, you can see some of our webinars and videos that are available on our website. And of course, our support team is always a great resource to help you with those compensation things. Now back to our analysis strategy. So this first plot was created with a default setting, but we can always format colors, fonts, fills, borders, titles, and so much more. And I've actually already got my format window open over here on the right. It's already docked in. So I'm just going to pull that open so that we can start working at this and just looking at some of our different formatting options here. So all of these here are different ways that we can format this plot. Now, once we've got it formatted, the great thing is we can right click and set this as a default or save as a plot theme. Now, I've done the work in the background to create something for you. Won't take you through all of those steps because there's a lot of different ways that we can change, and they're each are individualized, right? Because there's some people that like it to look like this, some that like it to look like that, and we wanted to make sure that we met every user where they are. So we're going to go back to that user options settings here. We're going to go to plots, and I'm going to change the current theme. And I'm going to use that workflow 2 and then click OK. And when I drag this data file in now again, you're going to see some of my formatting changes. So with this, I do want to show some other tools that make analysis quick and easy. If you're started, I've got size here, and I want to change the size of this plot. I can go to my Home tab, use align the widths, align the heights, and now they're the same size. I can align the top. Again, just making sure that whatever I need to do in my workspace, I can get it organized into something that makes sense. I can also multi-select both plots and go to my overlays, and now I can adjust how my parameters, both these parameters on the plots at the same time. I want to make sure that, again, no wasted effort. Everything that you're doing, you're kind of moving forward and not having to go backwards to recreate anything. So now that I've got this started, we'll go to gating. I'm going to do a little bit of gating. I'm going to keep the analysis side pretty short and sweet so that we can really get to what we need to. And that's to show you some of the shortcuts here on using FCS Express. So here we have our cells window, our cells gate, our first cells gate. Once we've created a gate, sometimes what's happened to me, I've moved that text box and it gets trapped behind the gate. Fortunately, we have a new feature where we can activate that text box. You don't have to worry about trying to move the gate, trying to get things out of the way. You can activate text box, click on it here, and now I can just pull it out. I don't have to go digging around for it. I can pull it out and move it to wherever I need to go next, right? Also, you can activate that gate as well. So if there was something in the way, maybe my gate was kind of trapped behind another one, I can activate a specific gate as well. Now, once we've created a gate, we can drag that onto the plot. Even though it has different formatting, it's going to grab those gated cells and apply them to the plot. If I like this original formatting for whatever reason, I could also just drag that out. And whenever we drag anything from a plot, it will conserve that parent plot. So I drag the gate out from the parent plot here, and now I've got this newly created plot down here that's just showing the cells, and it took that same formatting that was coming from that initial plot. Now in this other plot where I have a little bit of a different format, I'm going to change the bottom parameter here, introduce a polygon gate. Of course, all you need is 3 points. If you need more, you can add more, and a space bar will close that gate out. I'm actually going to do a replace a gate here because it looks like I had started some gates already in the background. So we're going to do OK here. This will be my length gate. I'm going to go ahead and recolor this so it shows up a little bit better here. Now, after I've created this gate, again, if I drag it out, I can conserve that formatting, so I don't have to go back and recreate anything. Now, adjusting any of these parameters, I can do it individually. Here on the plot, I can use the overlays. Another thing that I like is if I've created a plot and then decide, oh gosh, you know what, I do not want to use that density plot anymore. On the Format tab, I can change a plot. Just quick drop down. Now I've changed this to a histogram. If I need to do any of that smoothing, making adjustments, changing that formatting, it's here available to make those adjustments in real time. And of course, in our user options, I can also make additional adjustments. Now, looking at these two plots, they're both showing this CD45 per CP Sci 5.5. Now, what's great about FCS Express is it's getting very, very intuitive. And what that means is if I change my scaling, so I'm going to go into the axes here in my x-axis, and I'm going to change the scaling for my x-axis. Maybe I don't want by exponential. I'm going to change it to ln log. Notice the second plot adjusts for that as well. We have a feature that's called Remember Parameter Scale Formula. And what this does is if I change the scaling on a given parameter, it's going to update that parameter across the board. So any plots that I've already created are going to update to use that new scaling. So again, I'm not having to select each plot to go back and update that scaling. I can just change it. And when I change it on one, it's going to do the work for me. Now that's super great on some analyses, on some not so much. So if you are in a workspace where you're like, okay, it's great 99% of the time, that brings us back to some of that global in all new layouts and local user options. So some of the user options here, we're going to go to info and layout options. If there's a time that in a layout you don't want this the FCS Express to remember the scale formula, you can just come in and check this, right? So you don't have to change the global setting. You can just change it locally for this one layout. And additionally, while we're here, just a reminder that if we did need to make some changes to the compensation, we could do that locally for the layout here as well. So now I've got this started. I'm going to move this to CD3, and I'm going to introduce a marker here. So now we're just kind of getting into normal analysis. One thing that we've also implemented is markers. We can do a lot of changes and flexibility and customizing right here in the workspace. Maybe I am not feeling this rosy red here. I can use a blue marker. I can also change that for my stat box, and I can even change what the statistic is showing. So maybe I want percent of events. And I know you're saying like, Robin, that's not updating at all for me right now. Don't worry, we're going to get there. I'm going to show you in just a moment. We can recreate this text box, and then it's going to update with that new information here. So right clicking on the plot and recreate the text box, do all. Now we've got it in blue, and we've got the number of events showing as our statistics here. So I'm going to right click and convert our marker to gate. There we go. And we're going to replace this existing gate and then click OK. So once I've created this gate, I can also use it on other plots. I don't have to be like, oh gosh, I dragged the cells gate down here. Now I have no way to get this other gate on it. If I select a plot, I can use that drop-down menu and use my CD3 plus population to display on here. Then I can just move forward with choosing new parameters or whatever analysis I'm doing. I do enjoy that you can start texting and it will reduce the number of parameters. I've worked with some data sets that have about 40 different parameters here, and typing in to get to that one or two is always super helpful. It's again another way to just make that analysis super efficient as you're working through a workspace. I'm changing this dot size here. I do like to make sure I can see my events here. I'm going to throw in a quadrant as well. So now I'm going to right click and just create some new gates and bring back my gate window. Another place that we're very, I guess, efficient is that all of our windows, whenever we're bringing something new in, adding something new, we have the ability to make it purposeful. We're not having to recreate anything. We can use this create new gate if we need to replace an existing gate. We can do this, whatever our analysis entails. Most of our windows here pull double duty and they can do more than just one tool or one task. I'm going to change this to a color dot. And I'm going to now insert our gate view. So as I said earlier, I was kind of building a secondary gate structure here. I've got this first one and I've got this second one going. And you're like, okay, when I did some replace a gate, so now it's a little disconnected, right? I can only see gate one. One thing that's beautiful, after we've created our gating hierarchy, we can just drag and drop and relocate our gates. If we don't, we don't have to go back and recreate all of these gates and be like, oh, Robin dropped the ball. We can just say, okay, I can move my gates here and adjust. So now I'm going to see those colors here on the color dot plot. If I no longer need these gates up here, I can do a quick delete. If I need to make any other changes, we can double click and change these properties. Maybe I want to increase the line width. Maybe I need to change the name, the color, so on and so forth. We give you a bunch of different ways to get through that to make sure that you're really able to get things done that you want to do. So now the other thing I like about our gate view is that we can do those combination gates. So I'm going to right click here and just add a combination gate. We're going to call this, we already have it here. It's the CD3 gate, but I'll show you how I would construct this from scratch if I needed to. You can add a comment if there's some information that you need to know about this gate, but in the formula, if you're not sure what our operators are, if you right click, you can insert a format operator, and then you can insert a gate name. So any of your gates will be available here to select. Since I've already created that CD3 negative gate, it's no longer an option for, there it is, got it. So now I've got that CD3 positive gate that I don't want it to be part of, and change this color to something that is new, and we'll click OK. So now I have this gate. Now it looks like it's out of place, but again, because we have that flexibility in our gate view, we can just drag it out and we can put it in a new location. I'm going to go ahead and delete that gate so I don't get confused by my own hierarchy. I'm going to go ahead and drag out this other gate here, and I'm going to apply that not gate. So going to the gating tab, drop down for the current gate, do the CD3 negative, and then I'm going to change our parameters here. So as we're creating this, as we're moving through the workspace, we've gotten quite a few different plots here. And so now I'm going to take a moment of like, we've got some initial plots created. What can we do next, right? So with this, we've also got some gates already created for the CD16 and the CD19. So I'm just going to keep moving forward. I like to use multiplots. Multiplots can be a super great tool. There's tons of different things that you can use this for. One is if I wanted to see something like a plot, a given plot by all of the Y parameters. So I want to see everything by this side scatter here. I can use all parameters by Y. I can check off the forward scatter if I want to, click OK, and I'm going to get this new spread here of all my different parameters by that side scatter. If I just wanted to put eyes on things, just see how things are going across an experiment, this can be really useful. This can be useful for controls, FMOs, you name it. There's a different, compensation actually is what I was trying to go with. You can evaluate your compensation by doing N by N compensation plots. It has quite a few uses there on that multi-plot tab. Also, another way to create a lot of plots at once, on the Home tab, we have a duplicate option, and we can do a duplicate, multiple duplicate and next. Now what this will do, will create a plot just like this for multiple different samples. So if I click here, there's the maximum possible. I can do 8, right? Because I have 9 iterations right now. I can tell the software to put them in the same place, or I can have the software actually create a new page for me, and I can even determine out what the grid layout is going to be. Okay, this can be really great when I'm working with FMOs or any kind of controls. I can quickly assign the different parameters here as I go through to just make sure that I have the right parameter showing for the right control, right FMO, and it creates this really nice, easy way to get a bunch of plots in here really quickly. Now, the problem comes is this, right? If you look at my data list, you can see that some of my populations now are deactivated. So iterations in FCS Express are super important because it helps facilitate one of our other really efficient processes called batch processing. That's how we create those reportables, the PowerPoint, the PDF, etc. So whenever we see them grayed out, that means they're deactivated. And what it does is the software tries to remember how I'm using my data files and tries to keep that pattern for as long as it can. Now, we don't really necessarily need this page, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this so that I can restore this iteration. But now I'm going to take you to another trick. And I call this a trick because sometimes we need to look at more than one sample, right? We don't need just to look at each individual, we need panels. So one of the features that we've recently added is control tubes. These are awesome. So there are two ways that really deactivate iterations quite frequently in FCS Express. One is using overlays. The second is using spreadsheets. That was a big way that iterations got deactivated quite frequently. So I'm going to add panel here and start building this and click OK and OK. Now you can see here that my iterations look a little bit different, right? So everything is grayed out right now because my control sample is actually on these data files that I'm showing right now. No worries. I can do a control A and select the data files here. So I can select all the plots rather quickly. And then I can double click and I can change base overlay on selected objects to selected file by using that double click action. So it's going to update for that next file. Then my iterations are now active. Now I was talking about overlays because overlays are super beneficial when we're comparing a control sample to our test sample. So I'm going to drag this first data file that we've established as our control, and we're going to add this as an overlay. Now, when I add it, you can see I've now got this red line here in the background for my control. If I don't like the appearance of this, of course, we can do stacked and we can change how this looks. But what this does is now gives me the ability to maintain those iterations so I can still use my data files in similar ways, but I have the ability to do these overlays. Now, going a little bit further, maybe I need this same data analysis strategy for a second data file. So you see I set up this 2-panel data file set. One thing that's great here, again, I can use that control A, do a right click or control C on the keyboard, do a copy. I'm going to go to the second page here. Control V is a little trade secret. If you use that, it will keep the spacing and arrangement of those plots when you paste them on the next page, and then they'll stay selected. So now if I want to change that data file again, double click on the data file in the data list, change base overlay on selected objects to selected file, bam, everything's updated with that new data file. My iterations are intact. I can move through to look at these different iterations here. Right. So I can see those differences quite quickly. Now let's go to view. If I'm working with a really intense layout, I have 15 pages or so, it can be really difficult to keep up with everything. So we have this view option where we can look across our data set and make sure changes that we're making or things that are going on in our layout are consistent with what we thought was happening or what we want to happen in a given space. So again, I'm here now in just working through my data files. I'm going to just drag my data list out so we can still look at the changes made here, and then just quickly again click through our iterations. So those are kind of the features of getting us built up. Now, I have built this out a little bit further, and in the interest of time, we're going to skip over to that layout that has us just a little bit further along. So then we can look at some of the other features that really make analysis in FCS Express efficient, but not efficient at the cost of your data. When we do these layouts, when we create this analysis strategy, we are not only efficient, but we're reliable and reproducible as well. So now here we are, we've got this similar analysis started in a different workspace. And we're going to talk about summaries. So here I'm going to introduce one of my new favorite features also is the ability to batch process into an internal spreadsheet. This is really great for, again, keeping those iteration active and still being able to use summary plots like bar charts, pie charts, and other things. So how do we do this? we have this great feature called batch processing. Batch processing is very versatile. It gets us to those results. Do I want a PowerPoint, PDF, internal spreadsheet, external spreadsheet? What are the items that are the things that I need? So if you look at my batch processing here, I've already set up quite a few things because I have a little bit, a few different needs. So one is this in analysis folder. And what this is this gives me the ability to create that internal spreadsheet here and do this summary plot without deactivating any of my iterations. So this would be built just like any external spreadsheet. We bring in those statistics, we add them here. We can define how our internal spreadsheet is starting, whether we're writing columns, labels, and rows, or how we're doing things. And you'll see from my analysis here that I have actually two reports into the internal spreadsheet, and it's both going into the same place. Why I did two is because we have two data files in that one iteration, and I want them both to be reported out here. If I left it at just one internal spreadsheet, I would get the file name file set for the first three data files or four, and then I would get the next file name down here just in that same row because it's considered in the same iteration. So this way I can break up my data set and have the file names and all the statistics I want here set up in the same place. So that was one really easy way to then be able to create some reportables. After I have this internal spreadsheet created, what I can do is insert pie charts, bar charts, summary plots, whatever it is that I need to do to really optimize or get the end results out in a way that's explainable and gives the best display of what I'm trying to present from my data set. Now, any of these batch actions are also saved with your workspace. So again, just another place where you are able to um, kind of optimize what's happening in the workspace. If you want to use it, like I have this in analysis folder right now. So while I'm in my analysis, I run this batch process to create this summary chart. But then when I'm done using it, I can uncheck it. So then if I wanted to create other things, if I want to batch out to my results and get the PowerPoint and PDF, I can check this folder. If I want to save a layout, and these are all buildable, right? There's not a custom format. When we first open this batch actions, it's empty. You get to build and select what it is that you want. So I'm going to look at some of our results here. We're also able to customize all of these features. So you're able to define what it is that you want to be reported. And what do you want to do with it after it is reported out, after you've created this PowerPoint. I always open everything. I like to see what's happening. I do the pages here. So this is a big workspace because I'm presenting from my workspace. That's another way that you can really maximize efficiency. If I have to do a lab presentation, I don't necessarily have to create these. I can just open up my FCS Express and walk through my workspace and kind of give the explanation of what I'm doing and how my analysis is going. But here we're doing our PowerPoint action. I'm going to open this after saving. I'm going to use pages 4 and 5. I want them all combined in the same presentation. Maybe sometimes it's optimal that they're in separate presentations. We give you that flexibility so that you can really define what's going to work. Here we can save to a workspace. I've already defined that as well, but if you're new or creating something new, we have the option that in this we can do a pathway, we can get to a folder, and then we can actually create a new folder that doesn't yet exist. We can also use tokens. Tokens can be great. If I'm sharing this layout with a coworker, I can just put in a token to save it to the desktop folder. So then they don't have to go back and recreate this. Whenever they're doing whatever analysis they're doing, they'll click to work through this analysis. It will import this token. Sometimes I can even use maybe a file name or some kind of descriptor for this experiment. And again, it will create this folder. It will add it and create this reportable right exactly where I need it. Now with this PDF here, I actually did a custom grid. So one of the things that I really like is being able to see side by side how different my analysis or how different my data files are side by side. So you can create a custom grid in the PDF form here. You get plenty of options, full page, different size grids. How do you want these things to be displayed? I'm going to do custom grid and then crop to content. If I use these ellipses here, I can give some tiling options. What this means is, how do I want this to look? Do I want 4 columns and 4 rows? How do I want this to appear on that final element? And I'll click OK here. Again, the same abilities to either have iterations be separate, append, I didn't mention that before, but appending can be great if I'm doing a longitudinal study. I don't necessarily want to have 15 different PDFs at the end of it. I can append into the same place, so then I just have a, one PDF file that contains all the information that I need from my experiment, and then we're set to go. So we'll click OK here. For my summary sheet, so one of the things about our batch processing is that it will run from wherever we start in our data list. So if we're not at our first iteration and I started to run the batch processing now, I would only get one output because I'm looking at that third iteration here. So if I wanted to run this summary report, because it's the same, it's one summary for all my samples, I can set the software to start here and then click here to and then click on my run button to create that report. And then of course you can save the layout and do any of these other actions or reportables here. Again, once you've created this, this is saved within your workspace, giving you that opportunity that once you've created this, you can just come back and reuse it. You're not going to have to come back and recreate it. So going to our iteration plots, I just chose 2 plots from each of our data files that are within an iteration, and I've created this, and now we'll be able to see these 2 plots by each of our reportables. So I'll click run. Oops, let me go to my batch actions here and make sure that I'm creating those results here. And now I'm going to open this. So right now I started with the 3rd iteration. So you see I did that accidentally. Let me pop back to the 1 and rerun that. And there we'll go. Now we have those side-by-side iterations. So I have 3 iterations, both include 2 data files, or all iterations include 2 data files. And I get this nice report. I can see each of these data files side by side, and I can look through each of the iterations to see what's changed. Maybe one was a test, one was a control, one was 1 hour, one was 3 hours. Nice comparator to see those things side by side. And then my PowerPoint, oops, accidentally left my PowerPoint open, so I'm going to rerun that. And now I have my PowerPoint is updated as well. So I just did our analysis pages here, pages 1 and 2. There's 2 pages for each iteration. So I have a total of 6. Again, just a very nice way to get it into a PowerPoint without having to do a lot of adjustments, making sure that you're getting to those end results as quickly as possible. Now, like I said, the biggest thing, most important thing is after we've created all of this work, what do we do with it, right? We can save this as a template, and that's really the last tier of making FCS Express efficient for your workspace. I'm going to open up a template here. This is OMIC 69, and I'm going to just show you what a template looks like, because at first, when you first open a template for the first time, it can be a little disoriented. You see all these kind of just empty plots and maybe some errors here. And all this is just is a reminder that you need to add some data. And once I add the data, then I'll be able to pick up wherever I left off. I won't have to go back and recreate anything. I'll just be able to keep moving on. So this is like if I did day 2 of my experiment. I've created the analysis workspace. Now I'm just bringing in new data files. I'm going to grab them here, open those data files, and see, and this template, I actually have a different kind of panel. So one of the things that's effective and efficient with using panels as well is doing what I call as a load panel. And what this does is when you bring in your data into a template workspace, it will automatically load that first data file on all the plots. I didn't have to go back then and try to double click or do anything. All my data is loaded, and then I can just start moving through different data files, see what these changes are, and see what's happening. So it looks like my questions team has been great. Thank you, Holly, for handling so many questions in our question box. Is there any additional questions? I know that I've been moving kind of quickly today. Is there any questions that I can answer for you now? Please feel free to get those into the question box. All right. So while questions are coming in, I'm going to be here for a couple more minutes, of course, until the close of the hour to make sure that I can answer any of your questions. I do want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you being here and being on this webinar about how to do your data analysis in a very efficient and effective manner, and then use all of the hard work that you have put into FCS Express to really get that effort returned. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at support@denovosoftware.com, and also visit us at denovosoftware.com. We have plenty of resources. We have videos, we have webinars, we have access to the manual if you have questions. And if you aren't using FCS Express yet, please go ahead and download our free 30-day trial of FCS Express to see if it's actually a tool that will work for your analysis.